we're good to go then.
Okay, one quick
I did.
thing. I heard that Nikhil is left.
Huh? He has left?
Yes. See, they're posting the marketing channel. Matt Tanner posted that he's left.
Marketing team. Oh.
Yeah, the private marketing channel that we normally have.
I saw this coming actually. Like Matt Tanner told me that he might leave. So,
Yeah. Anyway, yep, a number of people have left, I think, these past few months. Anyway, that's life. What can you do? Right? So,
God.
oh, you got 64 people currently waiting there, which is good. It's a
Oh, I think
big.
we should start the webinar then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. So today's webinar is called Kafka Unleash, powering real-time AI with streaming data. So our speaker today is Mr. Akmal, who's a very regular speaker at our webinars. And I'm Yukti. I'll be your host for this webinar. So I work at Single Store and I'm in the marketing team. So one of my main jobs here at Single Store is to organize these weekly AI webinars, putting together content and working with amazing speakers like Akmal and other folks that, uh, come up with this content, and we are lucky enough to present it to you all. So thanks everyone for joining, and I think we have a reasonable amount of people now. So can you please, yeah, so we have amazing sessions that are coming up. So as you can see on your screen, we have a auto register button that's there on our website. So if you are interested in this session, feel free to tune in with us during the next few days. We'll be presenting amazing topics with, I think, Akmal, you also have some webinars in the future. So, and we also have Alex, who's a growth engineer at Single Store, and we're also planning to organize a certain number of webinars with a few guest speakers. So stay tuned for that. And so for today's webinar, we are hoping that it's going to be like an interactive session for you all, and I'll be providing the resources for everything that you need, like so that you can make the best use of your time. So it will be there in the chat, and for any questions that you might have, I would like to tell you that we have a Zoom Q&A button which is present at the bottom of your console, and you can use that to interact with us. And if there's anything that you need from me or either Akmal, if you have any questions, even during the session, feel free to just interject with the using the Q&A button, and I'll relay it to Akmal, and we can take care of it in case you get stuck. So as you can see on your screen, we have a link to the cloud trial. You can I mean, it's just like it's up to you if you want to sit back and relax and watch on and learn something, or if you want to have an active interactive session, you can go to the landing page that's present on the screen just by scanning the QR code. It's absolutely free. We also have a free share tier, so you can just as follow along with Akmal, and that would be a great experience because that's what I have heard from a lot of people that attend our webinars. So yeah, that's there. So Akmal, can you please go to the next slide?
Yep, there we go. The next
Oh
slide is
yeah.
me.
So this is just all right. So as many of you know that Akmal is a very regular speaker at our webinars and is really liked by a lot of people. So we keep on have him repeat a lot of sessions. So this is one of the top popular topics. So Akmal, thank you so much for attending and giving out your time for this amazing session that you're hosting for us today. And I hope that we all learn something today. And just an FYI that I'll be putting the resources to everything that Akmal is going to talk about, the link to try single store, our future webinars, and Akmal's notebook or any articles that might be relevant. I think Akmal has written an amazing Medium article very recently. I'll be putting everything in the chat. So if you're interested, feel free to use those resources and sign up for single store during the webinar, and just follow along. So yeah, it's done from my side. Akmal, please take it away. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Yukti, and thank you all very much for joining. I'm just seeing myself in the corner there. I'm realizing there's a lot of reflection of my glasses, so I apologize for that. Hopefully that doesn't distract you too much. I'll just minimize this window so I don't see myself. There we go. As Yukti mentioned, there is the opportunity to follow along if you wish to do so. And there is a GitHub repo here. And what I'll do is let me just, there we go. Okay, so I'll post this into the chat and then Yukti will share that globally, okay? Because she has as the MC, she has kind of, in quotes, God privileges, okay? So she can post to everyone, whereas I think I can only post to her. So let me share the link with her, okay? And so if you wish, you're welcome to. Let's have a look to host and panelists. There we are. I'll share this with Yukti. There we go. And so just a word of caution, okay? So this is something that I put together a little while ago, and I've actually presented variations of this. And so here we actually have a couple of notebooks, as you can see. There are two versions. So this is a kind of a fintech example, okay, but then kind of an interesting problem, right? So here we have something called Fintech Chatbot Full, okay, IPYNB, Jupyter Notebook, and there is something called Fintech Chatbot, kind of the simple cut down version of it, okay, which I only had 10 minutes to do that one. So I would recommend you get the full version, okay, if you want to download it. There is some additional instructions just below here you can see. Now, what this is I built a Python program for speech synthesis. So actually talking to the database system using English, it transcribes that, it queries the database system, gives me the results back. Now, on an Intel platform, this works fine. And previously, if you've attended any of my sort of previous webinars, Intel was great, but tended to really heat up my laptop. Since then, SingleStar has very generously given me an M3 Mac. Unfortunately, the Mac and the ARM version of the virtual machine I'm running, the software builds, it actually runs. I can speak to it, but its speech coming back is choppy. It's terrible. I need to look at what I need to do to improve that. Well, given time, well, I'll show you, okay, a little bit later on. But essentially, it's not. I mean, the thing is, it's not essential, right? It's just one of these extra things. If you want to try it out, it might be worth your time. But I would highly recommend that you get the notebook, okay? This is the FinTech Chatbot Full.ipynb. And a word of caution, I mean, we will use OpenAI for some of the queries, but there are cells within the Jupyter Notebook that are the equivalent in SQL, which you can run anyway, all right? So you do not need the OpenAI. I have the results anyway, which I'll share with you, okay? So that's just to get you started. So hopefully Yukti will be able to share that out, the link for the GitHub repo, and you can just grab that stuff. Either just make a copy of the repo or just literally just download that particular Jupyter notebook itself. Okay, you don't need the entire repo itself. All right. And then for those of you who don't have an account, here's the link. Okay, it's very, very straightforward. It's just singlestore.com/cloud hyphen trial. Okay. Uh, Again, that's just singlestore.com/cloud hyphen trial. Okay. And if you go to that location, you will see this page. And so you have the option of using Google or Microsoft, or you can do it the old-fashioned way, first name, last name, and don't worry where it says company email address. I think Gmail or any of these personal kind of emails will be acceptable. And then it will just ask you a couple of questions. Okay, just click continue. You just get asked a few questions. You'll get an email verification. Click and say yes. You know that really you are really human. So, and you'll get logged in. And once you do that, you'll get into the portal, and it will look something like this. Okay. Now, notice at the top here that it does say something about my remaining credits. So I started out with a fair bit of credits, and I've only got $107 US dollars worth of credits remaining, but it's okay. You know, these accounts you can create as many as you want. Yep, yeah, they are free, and So we'll get back to this in a moment, all right? And I'll show you. But I just the two things I wanted to do is if you haven't signed up, please sign up and get it and grab the Jupyter notebook if you want to follow along. Most of it, like I said, about 80 to 90% of it you'll be able to do. It's just the bits that have OpenAI that you won't be able to do unless you really want to. And you have access to OpenAI. But if you're wondering how much is this going to cost, literally it's like 1 cent. Something like that, or 2 cents US dollar in terms of US currency. All right, it's tiny amount, and so we'll get back to that shortly. Okay. All right, then. So my sort of agenda is very small. I don't have an enormous amount to discuss, principally because I want to get to the straight to the demos and show you the Kafka integration, okay, and then the streaming data coming in. So I'll just do a brief introduction that we show a couple of slides that we normally do. We'll say a couple of words about fintech, and then we'll just deep dive into the demo straight away. Okay. Now, a disclaimer and an important one. Okay. So I'm going to be using some stock data and it is entirely fictitious. Okay, so it's made up. This is purely for demo purposes, so please don't use any of this data for making any kind of financial decisions. Very important. And so you can access this Kafka broker as well. One thing to note is that because this Kafka broker is used for demos, sometimes the broker itself may go down. You might be trying to access it and you find there's no data coming through. We do try to stay on top of it, okay? And so if it needs restarting, we will restart that. I had to do that myself a little bit earlier on because no data was coming through. And so that's fine, okay? So not to worry. We do try to keep that alive as much as we can, okay? But if you have other sources of data to access, it's probably better, okay? All right then. So the two sort of standard slides that we tend to show at the beginning of the webinar is just a quick, brief introduction to Single Store itself. So as a company, it's been around for quite some time. Okay, started out live way back in 2011. Used to be known as MemSQL. Okay, you may have heard of us. So the focus in the early days was purely on in-memory processing for OLTP. Awesome speed. Subsequently, over time, added support for columnar data and for analytics, and therefore it didn't make sense to call the company or the product MemSQL anymore, hence the name Single Store. And so that happened a couple of years ago. And right now we have over $100 million in annual recurring revenue, and you can see the kind of inflection point round about here where it really started to grow between 2017 2018, and we have over 400 global customers. Okay, so these are like Fortune 500, Fortune 1000. Many of these are well-known companies. Some of the names along the bottom there in terms of investors, they are actually our customers. They like the product so much they decided to invest in us as well. So it's like the story. I think it is Victor Kayam is the gentleman I was thinking of, the famous advertisement on television. He told the story that he bought a shaver. He liked the shaver so much he went and bought the company. And so it's a bit like that. Architecturally, quick high-level view. So at its heart, Single Store has this kind of universal storage. Okay, so this ability to handle both OLTP and OLAP data in a single table type. And we have a variety of integrations. So today we're going to look at Kafka, for example. But in the past, we've done Spark, and there are other sources as well, S3, for example, Hadoop HDFS. And the animation here you can see is this kind of concept of pipelines, okay, which we're going to use today. So it's a great way to ingest data in parallel at scale into Single Store from an external source. And this is not exhaustive, okay? There's just some of the sort of popular ways that we can get data in. We do work on all three major cloud platforms in the Western world, and today we are going to be using AWS. You can run on-prem. Okay, we have customers, for example, that are in some verticals where dealing with data that may be of a particular sensitivity or through legal requirements, they have some concerns in terms of running things in the cloud, and therefore they run the environment entirely on-prem. That's fine. The product itself, relational at heart. Oh, pardon me. Just trying to be too clever there and just make that bigger. There we go. Relational at heart, but supports geospatial, full text, which we covered in December. JSON, okay, that support has been there for a very long time and it's improved over time as well. Plus the fact that we offer MongoDB compatibility through a product called Single Store Kai, okay, which you don't pay extra for. Okay, it comes as part of the overall offering. I actually covered that last week. Time series, so a little bit of that today. Okay, we're going to do a bit of that. And vectors, which we're not going to cover because we've done it to death in lots of previous webinars, and support for that is getting even better. Okay, but one of the things I've been doing recently is I'm trying to find ways to run a lot of these, LLMs locally. Olama is my sort of go-to and preferred tool and technology that I've been trying to work with. But I find that sometimes there are things that you want to do, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite work. So one thing that I'm interested in, for example, is how can I query a database system using natural language, but have that running locally. So today we're going to use natural language, but it's going to be in the cloud. I mean, and if you use something like OpenAI, for example, it works no problem. With Olama, it doesn't really work, or works but partially, or gives incorrect results. And I think part of the issue there is just tool support. So, these are things that you only realize and discover through experimentation and trial and error. And again, I've tried that recently, and it's something that I'll write up as a blog post and share my findings. Okay, so other things in terms of dashboards, ad hoc queries, machine learning. Okay, so this is kind of completes the picture there. Okay, so the gist of the argument that single store puts forward is that you may have an environment where you're working with multiple database systems. So, for example, you might be using MariaDB or MySQL and doing some batch ingest. Excuse me. Okay, and then you add some operational data and operational requirements to that. And then, of course, you might need JSON support. Perhaps you're sharing data outside your environment with third parties, for example, or maybe you're just dealing with JSON data as is. You might need some caching technology. And I've come across articles over a period of time where Redis, for example, is often used as a fast cache sits in front of MySQL. Equally, maybe you need something like Elastic, perhaps you want to do full text search, for example. And what about streaming data? You need integration with Kafka and maybe analytics, so something like Snowflake. So as you can see, very quickly, this gets terribly busy. There's an awful lot of technology that you have to kind of glue together to be able to get stuff done. And not forgetting Spark there for AI ML. Maybe you're using something like mlib, for example. So really what single store does is simplify this database sprawl. So that has two benefits. Okay, from a business perspective, you save money. Your total cost of ownership is reduced. Your return on investment is improved. You have one product that can do a wide range of things. There is no need for you to, buy multiple licenses. From a developer perspective, it again saves you time, trouble, and headaches. I've been in technology long enough to know that, swings and roundabouts. Technology comes and goes. Sometimes it disrupts the existing sort of technology significantly. I mean, if you look at some past technologies versus relational, for example, go back in time, we had object-oriented databases, XML databases, NoSQL databases. Think about how the relational vendors have been able to adapt to those requirements. So as I mentioned just a few moments ago, JSON support is available in single store. It's been there for some time. So, you may not necessarily need a document database, a NoSQL product such as Mongo or Couchbase, for example. That's already available, okay? So this can really help in terms of both the business benefits that you get and from a technical perspective as well. Okay, so one product can do a wide range of has a wide range of capabilities. So transactions, analytics, batch ingest, streaming data, which is really what we're going to look at today. Okay. And we've looked at things like Spark integration in the past as well. Okay. So fintech is the example that I've picked simply because it's an easy one. The Kafka broker we have has a couple of topics that it provides and some streaming data, and one of them happens to be stock ticker, which is kind of nice. That allows you to kind of ingest the data, and then you can do some slicing and dicing, create some visualizations and so forth. And we'll do a little bit of that today. It's a huge market globally. If you look at the figures there, I mean, it's almost 500 billion US dollars in terms of the market that's estimated for 2028. I mean, that's greater than the gross domestic product of most countries in the world. I would think, not many kind of gone below that. And what was the recent announcement? Sam Altman and co with Donald Trump, this 500 billion investment in AI. So you can see that, it's a huge amount of money. 25% global adoption rates of fintech, so it's growing fast. And then typically as consumers, I mean, maybe we are not aware of many of the offerings in the fintech space, but perhaps we've been touched by them in some respect. So at least the vast majority of customers know something about it. And then just to give you some examples of the sorts of things that we might be talking about. So, for example, portfolio analytics, real-time fraud analytics, okay, algorithmic trading, wealth management, and so on. Okay, so I mean, you get the idea. So perhaps some of us have come across these, or we have had the opportunity to engage with these over time. And typically for single store, I mean, some of the customers that we have are really looking for very fast response times, and they may be dealing with huge volumes of data. The example there is 40K concurrent portfolio dashboard users, 30 milliseconds in terms of query results. And there you can see some of the names there, some of the companies that are actually using single store for a variety of fintech applications. All right, then. Now, on to the demos then. So let me just switch across to here. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if you've logged in, you will see something like this as the home page. And if you check just under deployments there, okay, on the left-hand side, okay, let me just highlight that. There we go. You'll see that by default, you will have something that's running already for you. Okay, so there will be a workspace. Okay, this is your compute, and you will have a database as well. Okay, so you can hit the ground running straight away. Now, this is the kind of free shared tier. So this gives you the opportunity to start experimenting with it, with single store. Dip your toe in the water, try it out. Great for very small scale projects, but a nice way to just learn. And you will get credits as part of the account as well. And you are not burning through those credits as part of the free shared tier. So basically, those are available to you if you need something more. Okay, and then because of time constraints, okay, we'll leave that for today. But essentially, you can configure some additional resources just by going at the top here. Okay, just clicking on this down arrow, and where it says here, new deployment, for example, you can choose something that is configurable in terms of number of CPUs, for example, and the amount of memory. Okay, but this shared here, okay, like I said, I leave it running and it's not burning through my credits. I come back to this again and again. And for the demo today, it's perfectly fine. So it's got, uh, let's have a look. Now, in case you're wondering, you might say, well, how did he get that database name there? So if you see there, what I did was I um, sort of just up here, there is an option, okay, to terminate starter workspace and drop database. Okay, so that's what I did just to remove that. And then I recreated it, but then I did so with my own database name. That's how I got that. Okay, otherwise, they do get some default names, which are fine. Okay, I mean, you don't really need to worry too much about those. The other thing is that once you've checked that you've got your compute and database, the next thing to do is just literally get your notebook loaded in. And if you just go here to Data Studio, okay, here we go. And you'll see that you have this option browse. Okay. You can see I've got quite a few things and projects that I've been working on, but look on the right hand side here, you've got this thing here that says new notebook. Okay. And if you click this, you've got two options: literally create a new notebook or import from file. So you want the import from file option. And if you select that, is a wizard. So either drag the notebook that I showed you, which I think Yukti should have shared the GitHub repo with you, and then just put it into this space here where it says drag file here, or use this to browse the file system. And then once you've done that, this button down here will become active. Okay. And then it will just pull that in. And I've done that a little bit earlier. So you can see here that under this thing here, shared. Okay, let me just make this a bit bigger here. There is that very same notebook that I showed you a little bit earlier on, FinTech Chatbot Full. Okay, and here it is, um, ready to run. And at the top here, you'll see that it shows me the starter workspace and the database name. Okay, so just check that those two are visible. Now, in this case, you can see I can do the pull down here. So I've got nothing else running. So there's nothing else to choose here. But if you decide to configure something yourself, then make sure you select that correctly. You need that because it needs to establish a connection to the database where you're going to store the data. Okay. All right. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. So as I said, sign up, log in. Okay. Just check under deployment. You've got a starter workspace and database, and then just go to Data Studio, go to browse, locate the notebook, import it. And once you've done that, and check that your workspace and database are selected at the top, you're ready to go. And the only thing you need to do then, and again, you see the disclaimer here, just word of warning, just to make sure you're fully aware of this, okay? So please don't blame single store if you're going to use this fake data for any other purpose other than this webinar, okay? So there we go. So first thing we do, we just install some libraries, okay? And we got LangChain, okay? We've got LangChain Community. We have LangChain OpenAI and OpenAI as well. So that should be fairly straightforward. A couple of other imports here. So the key thing here, in order to do the natural language, which we're doing on the streaming data, we're going to use a couple of things here. This sort of SQL agent, okay, from LangChain, and this SQL database toolkit. So these are the two kind of key bits of technology, if you like. And OpenAI is what we're using today, but you could easily use this with another provider. Okay, it doesn't have to be. It's just that what I found is that with OpenAI, the costs have gone down considerably. There was a time when I first started using it, it cost a fair bit of money, obviously, but you know, the amount that you pay now is tiny compared to what it was some time ago. And literally, I have my own account now and get billed to my credit card. And it's not even worth my while claiming it back from single store because the amount is so small. So there we go. And so one thing that I've done is I have stored my OpenAI key within this secrets vault. So again, if I just go to the browse tab here a moment, let me just show you. So along here, you see there's a couple of things here. You got recent, personal, shared, gallery, firewall, and secrets. Okay. So in secrets here, this is a great way to just store the key. And I've done that already, as you can see. All right. So the value you can see is hidden, and I can edit that and I can change that as well if I want to do so. So that's very handy because especially if you're demoing things, it doesn't reveal the key. It will simply pick this up from here and utilize that. And that's what I've done here. So let me just go back here. So this is this line here in terms of single store DB management, import get secret. Okay, so we'll use that in just a moment. So the first thing here, we just check to see, are we using the shared tier? If so, we do not need to create the database because it's already done for us here. Okay. If we're not, we're using the standard tier, then what it will do, it will create a database for us called FinTech Chatbot DB. Okay, so that we need somewhere to store the data. So that's all that's happening there. And then we're creating this tick table here as a means to store our data. Okay, there we go. Right, so we've got a timestamp. We have open, high, low, closing price, the volume of trade, and we set the key as the timestamp. So very, very simple and straightforward, as you can see. Here is the key bit of sort of technology that we're using, this concept of pipelines. Okay, so pipelines work with a variety of different technologies. You can create pipelines for other, you know, sort of external sources of data. This happens to be Kafka. So you can see here, as load data Kafka, public Kafka, memcompute.com. So this is the broker that's available. So as I said before, we do try and keep that alive. And so it's got this stock ticker, which we're using. In this particular case, you see there's no additional, it's not asking for a username or password. It's public. I'll show you an example of where you might want to, how you could use it with something that's configured that requires credentials. Okay, we'll take a look at that in a moment. But essentially, we just set this up and describe what it is that we want to do. That our target is the tick table. That's where we want the data to go. And then, what is the field sort of terminator, if you like? Fields terminated by a comma. Okay, so it's comma separated values. And then just a description of what the structure looks like. So we've got the symbol, the timestamp, open, high, low, price, volume, and so on. Okay. So you do need to know something about the schema, if you like, the information, how it's structured, how it's coming in. And once you've done that, it creates the pipeline. Um, Very straightforward. And then here we can just say adjust offset. Basically, all this is saying is, all right, go to the very beginning of the data, if you like. What is the earliest one that you can send me and start from there? You may not necessarily want that, but in this particular case, we can take that. And then before we actually start the pipeline, we can test it and say, all right, in this case, I've decided, well, just show me one. And here you can see an example of the data that's coming in. Okay, that's what it's going to look like. So we have this symbol MMM. Okay, and there's the timestamp. You can see, so it's done a little sort of 23rd of January 2025. Okay, 21, 40, 32. And then we've got high open, high, low, price, and volume. Okay, so remember, all of this is made up. Okay, this is purely fictitious. And then, so we're happy. Okay, so we know that the pipeline's been created. We know that there is some data there. We've tested it, and then we just start it, and then you might have to wait a few moments. And I had to wait, let's see, from the time I ran the previous command, actually starting the pipeline, which was at 16:12:49 my time, so a little bit earlier today, and literally at 16:13:02, there is already, what's that? 4 million rows already been loaded into the tick table. So that's pretty fast going. And even it's been throttled. If you look here carefully, you'll see that the batch interval has been set to 45,000, which is required for the free shared tier. Right? It's just to throttle things a bit, okay? Manage the resources a bit better. If you decide to use the standard tier, you can, of course, adjust this value and you can choose something that suits your needs. But for this environment, that is, I think, what we're able to use. So data is just streaming in now, and it will keep going until I stop it, or the data runs out, or the space is full. So the free share tier does have limits in terms of storage. So I terminated this pipeline a little bit earlier on. This has got enough data in there. And then once it's in there, we can start doing things. So here, for example, using this SQL command just to create sort of candlestick chart, okay? And in this particular case, I'm just pulling out a couple of rows, anything to do with Apple here. So you can see that there's two entries here so far. Now, if I'd left this running a bit longer, probably I'd get a few more rows here. But in this particular case, it's only given me two. And then once we've done that, here we just connect to the database system. Okay. So you got this handy kind of connection underscore URL, which relies upon this thing up here. That's why it's always important to check that you are connected to the correct workspace and the database so that this is pointing to the right thing. And once we do that, we can start to do something interesting. For example, we could create some nice visualization using a bit of Python here. You can see here that I've got these candlestick charts. So you can see here the green is kind of positive, right? And this one's kind of in the other direction in terms of movement. All right. Now, again, there's only two kind of data points there, I think. Not enough, but you let it run a little bit longer. And then because this feed, as I said before, there are certain guarantees with the connection. You know that Kafka provides certain guarantees in terms of delivery only once, for example. Single store does the same. So we ensure that it arrives once and that you can stop and restart the pipeline. But here what we're trying to do then is to add something beyond that. So our feed is active. We're streaming data into single store. And in this particular case, obviously, the free share tier has some constraints in terms of resources. But if you have, say, a larger cluster of machines, let's say, you set yourself up with multiple leaf nodes, for example, okay, master aggregators, which is the mechanism that single store uses. And then what you can do, you can ingest the data in parallel. And that gives you, better throughput, faster ingest, and using the scalability of the system actually to get the data in. And therefore, there's much more that you can do in terms of processing the data much faster if that's critical to you. Uh, um, in this particular case, then all we've decided to do is to say, all right, so we know the data arriving. Why don't we try querying it using natural language, which is what's happening here. So I'm just using OpenAI and I'm just using this GPT-4 mini. Okay, so set temperature to 0, be as deterministic as possible, set verbose to false, and then here is the bit of magic that's going on using LangChain. Okay, so essentially we set this up. We tell it that we are looking specifically at the tick table. That's useful because if you have a database system with lots of tables, you don't want it going off and asking and interrogating those tables. Okay, we keep it specifically focused just to the tick table, which we know currently that's all that exists. But just for safety, we set up the toolkit, we point to the database, set up the LLM, and then we create this agent. And then the agent then again gives us this ability to have a kind of a verbose mode, which is useful. So currently it's set to false, again gives us the ability to understand how the natural language is converted. Okay, what are the steps it's actually using to go away and ask that query of the database system. So a couple of example queries down below here. Now, this bit of code here, a while back when I was doing some experimentation with LangChain, I found that I was getting some errors. I think it's something to do with the parser. I'm not sure if it's been 100% fixed. Um, the community is very active around LangChain and they are very fast and very responsive. But this code I just kept in here basically as a way to deal with this situation where I found that results were coming back, but unfortunately not being interpreted correctly. So this is all that this does. It just handles the situation and gives me, the correct answers back as I would expect them, as it kind of worked in the past as well. And so then we've got some example queries. So first query, I'm just asking for each stock symbol, calculate the volatility as the difference between the highest recorded price and the lowest recorded price over time. Which stock symbol has the least volatility? So I've asked it in English. How has it been able to interpret that? Well, it's come back with the answer and it's told me that the symbol that with the least volatility, pardon me, volatility is FTR. All right, now, is that correct? I don't know. But what I did was wrote a bit of SQL just below here, just to kind of test that. So, looking at the max high minus min low from tick, group by symbol, order by volatility, ascending, limit one. And the answer it gives me is indeed FTR. And it actually tells me the value as well, 0.55. So it gives me some confidence that, yep, the natural language is kind of being interpreted correctly. And keep in mind that because as long as you keep that feed live and the data are continuing to stream in, you may run this now and get one answer. 5 minutes later, you might run it again. It may give you a different answer. That's simply because new data have arrived. Okay, that's absolutely fine. I mean, that's the nature of this of the streaming data. The next query, then we can just ask the question to say, all right, then the default here is if you put in nothing, it will just ask, how many rows are there actually, or it gives you the opportunity to type something in yourself and ask that in English if you wish, or you just hit return and take the default, which is just the how many rows are in the tick table. And at that point in time, when I ran this, which was a little bit earlier on at 4:15 my time, it was 22,367,162 rows were available at the time that it ran this. Now, I can run a simple select count star. Okay, again, I did that just moments later. Um, Literally, let's have a look. A 0.04 of a second later, and there you can see, indeed, it gives me the exact same answer. All right. So again, bit of confidence there. Now, how could we extend this? So the speech recognition part, as I said before, if we have time, I'll show it to you. But we're kind of moving on a little bit of time. Let me show you the last two bits here. Okay. So the bonus thing. So you might say, well, okay, you've shown me the ability to get some streaming data into the database system, and yes, I can query that. Yeah, I can do that using SQL if I want to. I can use Python if I want to. Can do some visualizations if I want to do that. I could even ask in natural language, which is what you're showing me, and use LangChain to help me with that. That's fine. But what about if I want to extend this? Let's say I want to create a portfolio table. Let's say I've got some stocks that are already part of a portfolio that I hold. And how about finding some sentiment that is related to perhaps some of those stocks and shares as well? So here, what we've done is I've created a simple portfolio table. Okay. And I'm going to fill it in with some information as well. And then I've got some stock sentiment as well. So this stock sentiment has been derived from real data. And what I've done is I used WebAssembly and I created a function and I converted that into the right format, generating the sentiment as well. And that's available as a zip file, and you can download that and you can just upload that into the environment. So I've done all the hard work for you for that. Okay. So here's the portfolio. So as you can see, I've picked some shares here. There's kind of Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Tesla. I think that's Netflix. Again, beware that I just made these numbers up, okay? So please be aware of that. So that's my portfolio. Got 6 companies that I've invested in, and the number of shares that I hold, as well as the purchase price and the date. Okay. And I can just check the portfolio table, then say, okay, what's the value of all of this then? And give me, this is using a bit of SQL here. So the total value of that, the grand total is, what's that? It's 176, I think that's in US dollars. Okay, so 176,592 US dollars. That's what my portfolio is currently worth. And then here, in terms of stock sentiment, Okay, so this is the link to the zip file that contains the all the data. I think it's around about 100 megabytes, but it's got quite a bit of data in there already, and just some instructions there in terms of loading that into this environment. So there's a couple of ways that you could do it, and there's some examples there of some fictitious usernames and passwords. Okay, so just to show you the format, and I actually followed that a little bit earlier on. And for the stock sentiment table, then we've got sentiment, okay, which is consists of positive, negative, and neutral. Okay. So this is based upon headlines for these articles. So they can see an examples of Marvell's MRVL, Q1 earnings, and revenue surpassed estimates. Okay, so that's the headline for the article itself. There's a body associated with that. And so what this has done is the mechanism I've used using some Rust code and WebAssembly is generate these sentiments. And so in this particular case, you can see for this row, positive is zero, negative is zero. It thinks that it's one, absolutely neutral. A little bit further down, you'll see an example here where we've got a confused Goldman no longer expects S&P to drop to 2,400, but sees no market upside either. So for that one, positive is zero. Negative, you can see, is about zero point 0.4, and then neutral is about zero point 0.6. Okay, so this uses something called VADA, Valence Aware Dictionary and Sentiment Reasoner. So that's a very kind of clever piece of, the way the algorithm and the software work. It's the library can handle interesting situations. So things like, for example, specifying things in uppercase letters, using exclamation marks to stress things, emojis, for example, happy faces, sad faces. It can pick all of these out and determine what is the sentiment that's being conveyed. So it's actually reasonably good in terms of figuring out the overall sentiment of some text. And then here, what we're doing is just redoing this, okay, using LangChain's the agent again. But this time, notice that we've said, okay, use the tick table, use the portfolio, and the stock sentiment. These are the three tables that we want to look at now. And then here's an example query that takes it a little bit further. It says here, I'll read this to you. It says taking all the stock symbols from the portfolio table and using the latest value for each stock symbol from the tick table, calculate the grand total value of all the shares listed in the portfolio table. So essentially what I'm trying to do is say, all right, take the latest values that you've got from this live feed that's coming in, and then use that as a basis to figure out what is the value of my portfolio now. And if I do that, it says, um, well, I'm rich. Okay, so there you go. But it seems to have gone down in value. Notice it's 44,540. So the grand total value of all the shares listed in the portfolio table. So yeah, I'm all right. I started off with nothing. Okay, literally. I mean, it's just digital. Okay, but it seems to think that that's what the value is. Now, how do I verify? So a little bit of SQL code there to do the same thing. Okay, and we get the correct answer, and indeed it agrees with the value that the natural language returned. Okay, and then taking this again a step further here, saying using the symbol Apple, show me the date and the most positive sentiment in the stock sentiment table and the current best price for this symbol from the tick table. So again, it goes away and then comes back and says, okay, well, Apple was on this particular date, what was the sentiment? So it gives me the sentiment, and the current best price for that was 116.30. Again, you see a fair bit of SQL there to achieve the same result there, but we do get something very similar. So the date is correct. That is correct. This is slightly out, okay, but that could be due to rounding. Okay, so if we take a look at there, it was 0.3, and there it's 0.27. But other than that, it agrees very well with the results. Okay, so the key things to note from this is that setting up the stream is very, very simple and straightforward. Now, I did promise that I would show you something, and if we go to the left-hand side here, okay, to data ingest, and in particular to load data, all right, it's this thing here, which It's got this preview next to it. If you have a look in this list, you will see that there is a notebook here specifically for Kafka. Right? And if I click on this, it gives you something a little better in the sense that it talks through the steps in more detail, sets up a table for you, and it shows you a format and syntax to use in the event that you want to add things like credentials, for example. Okay, so your password here, for example. Okay, so that would be the way. And again, things like your Bootstrap server, for example, the port number, and so on. All right. So this is something that I've used previously in another example from a few years ago. But the one that we are using specifically today, as I said, it's public, it's open, therefore we don't need to provide any of this information. We simply point to the actual broker and the topic, and that's it. Okay, we don't need to provide any other details, any other information. Okay, so that's essentially how you would do it. All right. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, because I always go over and Yuxi knows this, so let's just go back, okay, and then say a few things. So, summary. So, setting up a Kafka feed with single store, very, very easy. The concept of pipelines is extremely powerful, very simple. In today's example, you saw me just provide the name of the broker, the port number, the topic, it's public, okay? The data are being streamed in. Now, even at that small scale that I'm using in terms of the free shared tier, it seems to ingest data very quickly, and I've got a fair bit of data to work with. And again, like I said a little bit earlier on, I stopped it once I'd got to a certain point, simply because I didn't think it worthwhile to just continue loading in more and more data. That works really well. And then, of course, as the data are being loaded, or even if I stop, I can do interesting things, okay? Either through SQL or through Python, or as you saw today, in terms of LangChain. The only caveat I would put with the LangChain and the natural language is that I am not 100% confident that it would always give you the correct answer. That hence the reason for writing the SQL code as well, just to test to see what is the equivalent. If you set the verbose mode to true, you actually get to see its thinking. What is the process and how is it evaluating that natural language? What is it going to go and do? The kind of chain of thought, if you like. That's useful to see. Because you can get to see, what are the steps that it's going to take, what's it going to look at. And again, important to restrict what it's looking at. So use the mechanism within the framework to say, okay, only look at this table or this set of tables rather than looking at the entire database. In the past, I made the mistake of essentially ignoring that, and it would go away and look at lots of things that I didn't want it to look at. Okay. If you specify a specific table name, that helps it focus. But if you just ask a general query, what is the value of Apple, for example? If I've got 10 tables in my database system, it will go and interrogate many of them. If I say, okay, go and look at Apple in the tick table, again, that restricts it. But if I specifically limit it in terms of the code, that's, I think, the best option. So that works really well. Okay, there we go. Uh, if you're interested and this looks like an interesting topic for you, and perhaps you have a case study in mind, Single Store can work with you. My colleagues in the SE team can, as part of this Go Live acceleration program, so we can work very closely with you in terms of assessment, design and plan. Let me try and get that. There we go. Migrate and validate, post-migration support, cutover support. So all of that's possible, and we will handhold you through this process as well. It is very useful. The customary, we are hiring. Okay, so if you're interested, singlestore.com/careers/jobs. We are a global company and we tend to hire globally as well. That's actually how I got the job. Years ago, I applied to MemSQL, focusing entirely on North America. As it happens, the recruiter very kindly remembered me once the company started to expand globally, and I was very fortunate that they hired me within a very quick time because they already knew me and I'd applied, but at that time they were not considering outside of North America. And so this, I think, is a great quote. I always like to use it from Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So hopefully you've seen that it's fairly smooth sailing, very easy in terms of the integration that we have. There are lots of docs around the Kafka integration, but as I said before, this kind of mechanism of pipelines works with a variety of different technologies as well. So, for example, if you've got some data and other sources, that can be, ingested in this sort of similar format as well. And again, if you're looking for certain guarantees as well, delivery once only, again, those can be guaranteed. Okay, so that works really well and gives you confidence that the data are coming in and gives you the opportunity to do your slicing and dicing analytics visualizations, whatever it is that you're looking for, or looking for patterns, or the particular example today, as you saw, we're trying to look at stocks and shares, look at a portfolio, doing some sentiment analysis as well. But again, my experience with the natural language is that I'm testing it currently locally as well. So if I run OpenAI on a local Jupyter notebook and connect to the cloud, it seems to work very similar to what we've seen today, no problems. What I'm trying to do with Olama using a variety of LLMs that have tool support, but unfortunately the results are terrible. So it maybe in time it will improve. Hopefully it will. Okay, but these things you don't always get what you want when you want it. Okay, you just have to be patient and just let the community drive that. And so with some of these open source projects, it takes a bit of time. There are other priorities as well, but that's life. Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time there. And Yuksi, I'll hand back to you and see if we got some questions. Anything interesting, or you want me to
Thank you
dive
for
in?
the amazing session, Akmal. So we actually have a lot of questions. There's one
Yeah.
question about from Gaurav regarding your blog that is, I think it's about accessing database via natural language. So, like,
Yeah.
have you written some blog like that?
I did actually, and you'll see what I can do is I can give you the link to that. So as part of your
Right.
follow-up email, you can include the hyperlink for that. So a while back, I wrote something that covered what we've done today, but it did a bit more. So we actually did some, for example, taking a PDF document as well, chunking that up, storing that in single store as well for RAG. And that was an extra bit that we did there. But today we focus specifically on just the natural language. And as you saw, with something like LangChain, and I think Llama Index is very similar as well, the framework essentially allows you to do this very easily. And it has the built-in support for being able to ask these questions in English. Like I said before, because language tends to be sometimes, not precise enough, it's very you need to kind of understand, set the verbose mode, see what his thinking is, look at the chain of thought, if you like, and if it's not correct, refine the way that you're asking it, improve the prompt, if you like, be more specific, give it more information, and that will hopefully give you the results that you're looking for. But yes, I can give you the link for that, Yukti. You can send that out as part of the follow-up email.
Awesome. So we have one more question from Tyler. They say that can you describe the difference between your product and Databricks? I see a lot of similarities, but like
Yeah,
their experience aligns more with Databricks. So if there's any
understood.
insights that you can provide, just that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. I suppose I'm slightly better placed than many people to answer that because I used to work for Databricks. So before I joined, so that was the last company I worked for before I joined Single Store. So I think Databricks has this kind of end-to-end platform that they are building as well, which Spark is one of the key technologies around that. ML Flow, they have a bunch of visualization sort of capabilities as well. And so I think our focus and where Single Store has come from is purely from the database world. This is what we started off as a database management system, a DBMS, and additional capabilities have been added onto that. And so I appreciate that there are some similarities. For example, Databricks has a cloud-based offering that allows you to run Jupyter notebooks, for example, or you could run R as well. I mean, that's something extra that they provide. We have that capability as well through our portal environment as well now. But at its core, the DBMS engine is the key technology, I would say, that single store provides. We happily integrate with a variety of external tools. You saw one example today, Kafka. In the past, we've shown Spark, for example. You can run Spark in our notebook environment as well, very easily. It's very useful. Certain problems in memory, big data, distributed processing. Spark is kind of complementary to what single store does. But I would say that first and foremost, it's our database engine that is the kind of differentiator, the key differentiator, something that the company has focused on for a very long time and tuned it. And that is what a lot of our customers use it for in terms of storage, distributed processing, SQL, and those things. And then, of course, we have these very nice features that have been added since JSON support, for example, geospatial, time series. Now, of course, the vectors, of course, that's, almost a must for a lot of vendors. The Jupyter integration as well. So those have come as well. So, and obviously, as a company, we are considerably smaller than Databricks as well, but we do have a global presence in terms of the customers that we have. I think if you're looking for a much more detailed comparison, we may well have a white paper. I think that's something I'll check after we finished. And again, I'll send a link to Yukti if we have some additional resources. But it's something we'll happily discuss with you if you want to do so offline. We can take that up.
So it seems to be that we are like on top of the hour. So that's all right. So we can just take one more question. We
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a very
sure, Yukti.
interesting question from Nityam. They say that they work in heavy Kafka live streaming of file processing in insurance domain. They're
Yeah.
not sure how to integrate the NLP or chatbot Gen AI solutions for the file processing failures. Will the NLP enable us also like predict future forecast of these failures in pipelines based on the daily S3 files dumped by different customers? They have also added another comment to their question. They
Yeah.
say that they have a lot of Dockers containers for the microservices environments with GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the entire question. I mean, I know it's like a lot to process. So Akmal, you
Yeah.
can also access the Q&A. So that
Yeah,
would.
so I think Yukti, the key thing there is that where failures occur, I mean, obviously logs will be generated, right? And there will be ways to analyze that. In this particular case, all we're doing is, and I showed you a very simple use case here. We're simply, it's kind of like end user. So I could have built a slightly better visual kind of chatbot, if you like, and I prompt the user for whatever query they want to ask. I could then have a nice kind of visual front end, something like Streamlit, for example, or equivalent. Okay, and in this particular case, I just chose it to do it through the Jupyter Notebook, simply to keep things simple, rather than adding an extra layer of kind of complexity. There is nothing to prevent you utilizing the natural language if, for example, you're collecting log information or details of failures in, say, other tables. You could query those using the natural language. Absolutely. In this example, you saw that we had a couple of tables, the tick table, the portfolio table, the sentiment table. I restricted it specifically to those tables. And then the kind of queries that I were asking was kind of make sense. Now, where the natural language is unable to determine any data, it will come back and say, I don't know. Okay, or it will say there is insufficient information for me to give words to the effect that I cannot put together a response to you because I haven't been able to find the appropriate information. So the key to this is ensuring that where you've stored the details of the failures, for example, if they are stored in a location that's accessible, say you store them in a relational table, or some mechanism that can be easily accessed, certainly something like the natural language will be fairly easy to accommodate in terms of building the front end is very, very simple, as you saw, just using LangChain. You could make that even nicer, for example, just using a package like Streamlit, and then just asking the questions. But the questions need to be framed in a way that makes sense. You have to have, I think, some domain knowledge. So, for example, consider that the questions that I was asking of this system today, I knew something about the structure of the tick table. I know something about stocks and shares. I know a little bit about sentiment, right? So I can frame the prompts in a way that makes sense for that kind of domain. So similarly, if you want to query the log information, you would store it in a way that's meaningful. So to give you the opportunity to be able to ask these questions in English. And just to kind of quickly sort of wrap up there, in the past, the what LangChain used to do was when I used to ask questions which didn't make sense. So, for example, if I've got this scenario set up, and then I used to ask the question, for example, who was the first man on the moon? That makes no sense. It's got nothing to do with stocks and shares, okay? But what the response it would come back was say Neil Armstrong. And I was thinking to myself, where does it get the answer from? And so the reason for that is that it's just going off to the large language model and it's getting the answer from there. And now what I find is that having the ability to restrict it and then giving it a kind of more context, if I ask it the question now, so for example, in one of those queries, I ask it the question, who was the first man on the moon? It'll come back and say, I don't know. It's kind of frame of reference is beyond what we're trying to achieve here, right? It doesn't understand that question makes no sense for what the data it sees. And so that's a good thing in the sense that you're asking a silly question and it's not even giving you a silly answer. It's just telling you, I don't know, which is again very helpful. So again, think carefully about the structure, how you want to store the data, what sort of things that you want to collect in terms of log information, and then have prompts that are meaningful for the sorts of things that you want to discover in that data. So it's eminently doable, definitely.
All right. So actually, we have more questions, but unfortunately, we are like almost over time. So if you have any questions like that are like you feel like are really important, you can definitely reach out to us at team@singlestore.com, as you can see on the screen. Or you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn for any feedback or any questions that you have regarding the session. If there's any projects that you're working with, you want to share with us, and you want us to actually organize a webinar on that, very happy to do so. We always like appreciate any ideas that are coming forward. So would absolutely love that. And Akmal, thanks amazing for this amazing session, and I hope to see you all for the next session. If you like today's session, feel free to tune in for like our future webinars that are going to happen in the following few weeks. So thank you so much. You all will receive a recording of this session and a follow-up email. So stay tuned for that, and I'll make sure to give you all the resources that you would need for anything that you would that is relevant for the session. So
Yeah,
thanks
I'll
everyone
send
for
you those,
joining.
Yukti. So sorry
All
to
right,
interrupt.
yeah,
I'll send you the links
absolutely,
momentarily. We're just going to finish now. So I'll Slack you
absolutely,
those resources, okay? So you can send those.
absolutely. So yeah, that's absolutely okay. So Kapil, I see your questions and like so your comments regarding any options for any startup, any subscription related information. You can uh, you can just email us regarding that, or maybe just like you can reach out to me or Akmal on LinkedIn. So absolutely happy to chat on all that. So definitely. Thanks for joining everyone, and I hope to see you all next time. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of the night.